Zack Snyder's Batman, a very underrated legend that was hated by a vocal minority and called inaccurate because YouTubers and people who only pretend to read comics said so. A more flawed, human, and realistic take on Batman as a character who strays from the standard depiction ever so slightly, but in a way that makes sense, as we are going to cover in this video. Most of the criticism people regurgitated because they were unable to think of actual criticisms for themselves were along the lines of, oh, it isn't like the books because he kills, and then a bunch of dumbins bandwagoned upon it as they do with a lot of other things, and bam, we have a flawed perception that was probably secretly influenced by their competitor via literal bots, which have been proven to be used as shown by these totally coincidental images of accounts all saying the exact same thing leading up to and coinciding with the release of BVS, or a website hosting a vote for the Best Comic Book Movie of the Year award. And when BVS won, even though it was the theatrical version that cut 30 plot crucial minutes out of Snyder's intended vision, you'd never believe that the poll was deleted and they straight up gave it to the film that distantly landed second place. What a coincidence that the movie that was rigged to win the award was owned by a company that owns close to half of the entertainment industry. But getting back on track here, when I said at the beginning that despite Batman's characterization in BVS not being the standard depiction, that he was still accurate is because much of his history is implied throughout the film's subtext. Batman was our typical standard Batman at a point, not killing or bat branding people or doing anything remotely similar to that, until the losses he endured piled up to a degree so miserable that Bruce was forced to acknowledge the reality that his efforts over the last 20 years had been largely futile, in Bruce's mind at least. It was that long-standing reason eloquently conveyed in Batman's opening scene with Alfred that was what drove his new mindset, that he wasn't gonna play as nice in Gotham City anymore. I didn't just make all this up, it's clearly showed in the film if you turn your dumb McDonald's TikTok MCU popcorn flick brain on a proper setting. You would have noticed most of the following. I mean, come on, the way that Affleck is often criticized, you would think that he just woke up on the wrong side of the bed one day and decided to start branding criminals, not just any criminals mind you, but criminals that are shown to be literal international terrorists, human trafficking mercenaries. They're not at all just ordinary thugs that came on hard times causing them to resort to lives of crime. Again, you don't need a video of me explaining this because all of it is shown in the movie. We're shown the most basic parts of his lore, literally starting off with the loss of his parents for one, as it is literally the driving force of Batman. Not to mention a dead adopted son in the form of Robin, which somewhat confirms the death in the family storyline happening in combination with other pieces of lore that likely happened, such as a Killing Joke, which crippled Barbara to torment Gordon, and then the cherry on the sundae is a big piece of family legacy being destroyed by God's doing battle. Another thing that added to his rage. Another thing that made him feel powerless. Another thing he couldn't fully control, like this damn city. Lex Luthor also pushed him into it with some rage bait letters attacking his family legacy, with quotes like, "You let your family die," which is something that has always meant a lot to Bruce in all iterations, no matter how much he tries to downplay how much he cares about the people around him. All of this comes together to redirect Batman's frustration with everything that had happened to him over the last 20 years, now towards Superman, where he goes as far as to say that,
"This may be the only thing I do that matters."
20 years of fighting criminals amounts to nothing.
Criminals are like weeds, Alfred. Pull one up, another grows in its place.
is this logical? Well, you could interpret this as you wish as I contemplate the mindset that Arkham Knight endorsed in its ending, but is this what Batman would have usually done? Definitely not. But it is a logical result of everything that happened to Bruce over the last 20 years. Most definitely, and if you deny that, then you don't really care about these characters as humans, more like idols or action figures that you can smash against each other endlessly without any of them feeling anything or breaking. But no, this is not the case with well-written characters from directors like Raimi, Nolan, or Snyder, where circumstances do take a toll, like a city that hasn't changed despite 20 years of Batman's best efforts, all this going in tandem with each other and culminating to the point where Batman starts to make
new rules.
We're criminals, Alfred. We've always been criminals. Nothing's changed.
Oh, yes it has, sir. Everything's changed. Men fall from the sky. The gods hurl thunderbolts. Innocents die. That's how it starts. The fever, the rage, the feeling of powerlessness that turns good men cruel.
With all this being said, it sorta makes sense as to why he wouldn't care about whether criminals die or survive anymore, especially since he knows they won't change. Like, statistically, most criminals go back to jail after getting out, and I'd only imagine it would be worse in a city like Gotham. Like, try to put this in a more real world that Snyder made, or put yourself in Batman's shoes. If you lost your parents, one of your adopted sons had your best friend tortured along with his daughter being crippled, you'd probably pull less punches too. You know no one would keep pulling punches. It is funny too, because these details of loss can easily be inferred with even more lines referencing Gotham not changing, and things only getting worse.
He is not our enemy.
Not today. 20 years in Gotham, Alfred. We've seen what promises are worth. How many good guys are left? How many stayed that way?
As I just said, pretty easy to infer since the knowledge of Batman lore shouldn't be that niche even to average casual viewers. But anyway, on to comic accuracy complaints, which is honestly the most obvious way people complaining about Snyder's Batman expose themselves, whether they be blissfully unaware of the comic Snyder took inspiration from, or are full of shit pretenders acting like they vividly know every little detail about Batman's roots but don't actually read comics to begin with. Or others that actually know the lore but are hypocritical pick and choose hypocrites. BVS is a film that has many comic inspirations like Superman Birthright and The Death of Superman of course, but most importantly to this video, we had The Dark Knight Returns, which Zack Snyder himself stated was the main inspiration for BVS long before the film's release. Out of all the books I just listed off, The Dark Knight Returns is the main one, as could be seen by Batman's suit in the movie objectively being the closest live-action suit to an actual comic suit. Snyder's Batman is also an older Batman, like The Dark Knight Returns Batman, although Ben Affleck's Batman wasn't as old as his was 47 instead of 55, and didn't retire like the book version that retired after 15 years and came back 10 years later, which funnily enough Nolan also took loose inspiration from for The Dark Knight Rises. But superficial details aside, BVS takes various details, themes, scenes, and lines from The Dark Knight Returns. First and foremost, we have Snyder's Batman killing, which happened in the first appearance, and a few other older comics. And sure, you'll have some pick and choose nerds say that, oh, those older comics are too old and niche to count. But who do you think understands the character of Batman better? Some writer working at a company hired to write Batman stories, or his literal creators who depicted him killing? But beyond that, we have the critically acclaimed Dark Knight Returns graphic novel with this warehouse scene where Batman straight up shot a thug that was holding a child hostage. It was a machine gun, which therefore means it was not shooting just a single shot, hence the brack sound instead of the bang sound. Based on how he isn't holding the gun downwards, he didn't shoot the thug's foot. Since his head is cut off panel, one can interpret that he was shot in the head, as Snyder stated in an interview pressing him over the so-called kill rule that he broke in BVS. I'm saying all of this because people on Reddit or elsewhere try to cope and argue that he didn't kill here, when one can easily infer that he did. There's a lot of people who are so desperate to preserve his no-kill rule that only started to exist due to comic and cartoon censorship for children, hence why Keaton's Batman killed in the 1989 Batman film, and got way less flack for it as Keaton's Batman movie, released in 1989, which is a release date that is after The Dark Knight Returns, in 1986. Again, it is important to note that Batman in the instances he does kill is more like a police officer when it comes to how he kills. It isn't at all murder or slaughter in the style of the Punisher like some low IQ MCU tards and gun monkeys claim, because the Punisher goes out with the express intention of killing multiple people. In the case of Batman, it is more like, I am going to resort to any means necessary to stop this crime, such as the murder of a little boy or Martha, and if you continue resisting arrest, then my force may proportionally increase, which could result in your death. The only exception to this is Superman, who was the first person Batman goes out of his way with the express intention of murdering. If you see no difference between a thug getting killed in a fight and Batman driving a spear through Superman's heart, then you're just an idiot. No, I'm not kidding, and it isn't really my opinion. Legally, you are an idiot, because not every single killing is classified the same. There is manslaughter, then murder of 3 degrees, with the first degree being the express intent of planning a murder and executing it, which is what Batman was going to do to Superman. Not at all the same as violent vigilantism. And if you put them all on the same level, then that's why you're probably sitting at home pretending that Superman was a success all day instead of being asked to represent someone in the court of law. Bum-ass Cosmonaut or High Tops Films probably just watched the Dark Knight Returns animated movie that changed the writer's visions by having Batman just shoot the criminal's hand and then knock her out, which was not what happened in the panels I showed earlier. The comic writer Frank Miller had no involvement whatsoever in the animated movie, which makes this movie change an invalid argument and depiction of the event in this case. There's nothing that indicates that the criminal survived. Sure, the cops didn't go after him for killing that thug like they did for when he killed Joker, but they didn't have any evidence as the thug was killed by a weapon that belonged to one of the other criminals, instead of a batarang lodged into his eye or a snapped neck. They'll point to lines like him saying that guns are the weapons of cowards, or him saying killing is a line he won't cross, but the whole point of that story is that Batman was an unreliable narrator, as he would say things like that, but then at the same time use guns 3 times in that book alone, beyond him shooting that one thug, because in another scene, he straight up brings a gun to use, and in another scene, he uses one to escape the cops. I think he just copes with killing, which is something he was against all his life, just like Affleck, by treating some of the kills as kills that don't actually count, such as a hostage situation involving a child, or the Joker who Batman obviously killed, since it is physically impossible to generate enough force to snap one's own neck by turning it alone. And it was instead Batman coping with the fact that he finally killed his arch-nemesis. The laws of physics aside that are pushing it even by comic book standards, both the comic and movie heavily imply that Batman is hallucinating the Joker's banner despite either being paralyzed or dead when Batman tells him to stop laughing as Joker's body is burned. Now, I know a decent percentage of people don't like the sequel comic The Dark Knight Strikes Again, but in that comic it further confirms that this Batman is willing to kill. I'll try not to spoil the plot details of this comic too hard, since many of you haven't read it, since it isn't the type of comic to get an animated movie. But Batman straight up beheaded someone who was close to him and threw his body into a burning pit of some sort. And then he had Lex Luthor killed by Hawkboy, as is bluntly confirmed by Batman saying, "You're about to die," before he indeed does die. He even goes as far as to say, "Way to go, kid. That was great." The story isn't as acclaimed as the first one, but I still like it more than most comics despite some moments deliberately being overly confusing. But whether you like it or not, my point is this story further confirms that this Batman killed, and since it was also written by Frank Miller being the direct sequel to The Dark Knight Returns, there is no way to deny that Frank Miller's Batman kills. And this isn't me citing some niche as hell book like Venom having goofy ass wings. It's a Batman story that mostly falls into the top 3 rated comics, if not number 1. It's also one of the only highly acclaimed comics that has both Batman and Superman in it, which makes taking inspiration from it over other comics a logical decision, and unlike that weird comic that Frank Miller wanted to use Batman for, where he'd have the hero going around the Middle East killing Muslims, which DC slammed the brakes on. But on the other hand, the runners at DC Comics allowed him to have Batman kill in both of those comics, clearly showing that they were fine with the character doing that. But you know, the MCU as early as Phase 2 gets a pass when they objectively strayed from the source material way more, which could get its own video, as you get paused for with these bigger MCU 180s I won't bloat this video voicing. Not saying that BVS is one-to-one with its comic inspirations, as they are differences, but next to no other live-action comic book movies are as close. BVS is just objectively one of the closest, and if you hate BVS for comic accuracy, then you just don't get to like any other live-action superhero movie without being a hypocrite, as the only movies that are debatably as close to their source material comic is Raimi's Spider-Man 1 with the origin story of the Amazing Fantasy, despite some minor differences or petty complaints, or Watchmen, which is the closest to its comic ever. And yet it's a Snyder movie, which means Snyder only loses to himself. Oh, and don't give me that bullshit copy and paste Cosmonaut spirit of the character bot take that bots say when they back themselves into a corner when someone calls out their blatant double standards, which they don't only do with Batman but also did with the new 2025 Superman movie, which is objectively not comic accurate since Gunn twists Superman origin story making it so that he was sent to Earth to conquer it. But when you confront them with such information or other examples, they'll say, well, he feels more like the character to me. And there you have it. It is more about feelings and emotions rather than any sort of comic book accuracy detail. But they use comic accuracy as a criticism to mask that, because nobody wants to admit, I don't like this because it made me feel uncomfortable and I didn't want to see the characters do that. So instead, you can just vaguely refer to thousands of comics, hoping that nobody calls you out for your ignorance as a reason for not liking a take on a character. Well, here I am, calling you bots out on it. You got away with it for far too long. Again, this Batman did kill people, but he never went out of his way to kill criminals, as shown by him bat-branding criminals before they go to jail, which was a fairly central plot detail, as Lex took advantage of that bat-branding by hiring people to get those branded criminals killed in prison, so that Superman would have more of a reason to go after the overly harsh vigilante, which takes slight inspiration from The Dark Knight Returns, where Superman fought Batman because the government told him to do so, because
they only want me dead because I'm an embarrassment. Because I do what they can't.
But anyway, like the comic, Batman didn't go out of his way to keep criminals alive for the most part either. He's sort of like a semi-regular, decent yet harsh cop in a way, who doesn't set out to kill people, but will even though he might have the option not to, as stated earlier. You can see this in the film, as less than half of the criminals die in the film. On top of this quote from Zack Snyder.
I tried to do it like by proxy. You'd shoot the car that they're in, the car would blow up, or the grenade would go off in the guy's hand, or whatever. Or he'd shoot the tank of the thing, and the guy pretty much lights his own tank with the thing. So I perceive it as not him killing directly, but by sort of, if the bad guys are associated with the thing that happens to blow up, he would say that that's not really my problem, like they shouldn't have been around that. So machine gun. Yeah, a little more like manslaughter than actual murder.
Yeah.
That interview that I added in post sounds pretty familiar to what I voiced earlier. But yeah, Batman is not going to take the extra steps to keep you alive. If you're doing bad shit, you may die. He's not going to take the extra steps that could be costly and would objectively take longer, such as grappling people out of their vehicles. He's doing what needs to be done. I guess a Batman film that would have taken place before this and showed his fall from grace would have been good too, but the message is shown clearly enough in BVS as a single movie. As said before, audiences know who Batman is, yet the people who make petty complaints got mad that BVS showed his parents being killed in a mere 5 minutes, but anyway. He's a righteously angry vigilante that has lost a lot and took out his anger on Superman in such a way that almost went too far, as he almost took his anger out on someone undeserving.
I bet your parents taught you that you mean something. That you're here for a reason. My parents taught me a different lesson. Dying in the gutter for no reason at all. They taught me the world only makes sense if you force it to.
Man, what a giga yet depressing line that really embodies the mental scars and self-motivation Batman has through a lack of parental guidance that was taken from him. This is a line that never made it to the Dark Knight Returns animated movie, as it was never spoken in the book since it was thoughts in Batman's head. But as you can read here, these lines with very few changes were from the Dark Knight Returns comic, which is something that next to no live-action superhero movie does it all with their comic inspirations, other than the great power comes great responsibility quote. But anyway, now we have the most bandwagoned upon moment that was memed on as if it were bad. Save Martha, where every shill, shallow critic, and bandwagoner jumped upon it while misunderstanding what was conveyed clearly enough if you weren't some ultra-casual, low-thinking dummin'. Oh, it's shallow because Superman just said save Martha and the conflict was over. So dumb. Which is technically what happened if you look at it in just a literal sense, but is everyone gonna play dumb and forget Batman's mental trauma revolving around his parents, like we've seen in various other forms of Batman media, like Keaton's Batman, the Arkham games, and various other books such as the Tower of Babel, where he states it as a weakness towards himself.
While Batman is a master strategist and combatant, he is only human.
The best way to disable his strategic abilities would be to distract him. His parents are an excellent blind spot.
Seeing Batman trip out over his parents happens in next to every adaptation, such as Arkham, even without the use of fear toxin. On top of all those examples, they're cutting to his parents to show you what he's thinking of. Beyond all the parents' trauma, it's a reminder of his fall from grace when he's about to kill someone who's not even evil at all, despite what the shill media has said about Superman throughout the whole movie. Through Superman's final plea, when Batman is about to kill him, he begs Batman to at least save Martha. Due to the comic-accurate coincidence of their mothers sharing the same name, he gets reminded that Superman is pretty much another person with a mother, just like every other human. Superman has what Batman has lost, and it wakes Batman up to how angry he was at the world, to the point where he transformed into the thing he became Batman in the first place to stop. A heartless murderer taking a boy away from his mother. Had he gone through with his plans, Bruce would not have only just been helpless, but the very reason that Martha died. All these realization factors combined is why he spared him and came to his senses. After all this, he's set to redeem himself by helping Superman save Martha from Lex Luthor's henchmen, something that he was unable to do for his own Martha as a child. But anyway, with how clear these details I laid out are, it's not a good message with bad execution, as some people backhandedly claim. It was clear as day. It's a viewer skill issue. Don't go calling moments bad because you watched a YouTuber's shitty take or parody of it. The actual media literate were doing just fine. And yeah, maybe some of the memes were funny, but it was done to death. But that doesn't mean the original scene is bad. I mean, Peter crying to Uncle Ben's death is one of the oldest memes of the internet, but that doesn't make that scene any less heartbreaking. But after this, Batman does what he couldn't do as an 8-year-old. He saves Martha. Not just from one petty crook, but from multiple gunmen and mercenaries. He's not a little boy anymore. He takes down everyone in the best Batman fight scene ever, and then saves Martha, signifying the start of his redemption and return to grace. He doesn't even brand Lex Luthor later, despite Lex almost destroying the world and getting Superman killed. Before we get on to the last point, let's just do a straightforward re-summary into it with Junkie XL's badass, partially villainous Batman theme that really nails his themes. The story of Snyder's Batman is a story of a broken, crime-fighting veteran who's lost too much and has seen too much people go bad to the point where he's lost the will to be compassionate and has replaced most of that compassion with vengeance. So much so that he apparently falls from grace. But can one blame him when he fights such things that are destined to be the way that they are, such as Gotham City itself? He's fighting fate itself. Can one blame him for falling out of this beautiful light, falling out of this beautiful lie into the darkness? No, you can't. And what he does, despite being a darker version of it, is still vengeance. He is still the Knight. He is still Batman. But then there's Superman, an innocent reminder of compassion despite the aspects of the world and press being against him. He doesn't get as shaken by the darkness. This is probably due to him having more people around him, like his great mom and Lois. But the point is, when Batman is reminded of this light and spares him, he is redeemed despite Superman's sacrifice shortly after, when Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman work together to stop Lex Luthor's doomsday creation from destroying the world. Superman stopped him from falling too deep into the abyss and changed him back into more of the man he was. It's kind of funny that despite the title of the movie, Batman was saved by Superman, as shown by one of the most hopeful speeches ever seen in a comic book movie, despite people labeling Snyder's films as dark and edgy.
Men are still good. We fight. We kill. We betray one another. But we can rebuild. We can do better. We will. We have to.
Well, that's the video. I just about covered all the main regurgitated points that aren't smaller nitpicks. I know the comic accuracy segment was long and something that could honestly get its own video, but it had to be stated since it's his main criticism, pushed by pick and choose nerds or comic book accuracy pretenders influenced by shitty YouTubers and shorts telling them what the characters are supposed to be. Sure, you can embrace my defense or go back to hive thinking, as I'm sure you gun monkeys will do, but for those rare few who just don't like the movie without hive thinking, sure, you have the right to carry on with your inferior perspective, but to pretend that most of what I defended and proved justified was objective criticism is retarded. To downplay the people who like this movie just because they're not as dumb as you to miss all these points that are clearly conveyed in the film is retarded. I didn't even use points from the Ultimate Edition, which was basically supposed to be the default version, but WB butchered it by cutting down its runtime so that Superman was barely in it and Lex Luthor's plan didn't make as much sense, all to sell more movie tickets, which ended up backfiring so badly that WB is getting passed around more than a thought at a college party, with them going from AT&T to Discovery and now probably Paramount, all in the span of less than a decade. Sounds like they were just trying to cater to the recent simple cookie-cutter Marvel films that didn't have 3-hour runtimes until Endgame, despite Marvel being a movie company which almost never tackles deep content close to DC, outside of Raimi or the Fox X-Men movies. But I guess that makes sense since thinking, well, deep critical thinking, is a minority, especially a bigger minority, in these modern times from around 2013ish and onward. Hence why DC is destined to be called second place by the general masses, only for them to try and bring Gunn in, who made DC more dumb than the MCU and made the company bleed more money for it. But whatever, I've had this tangent in other videos. But anyway, I'm not necessarily the supreme intelligence for seeing things that nobody else does in this video like I usually do, because a lot of my points have been said by other DC fans along with some that focus on the artistic cinematography and art references that the likes of his best pal Christopher Nolan has complimented him on, which goes to show how goated Nolan was for handpicking Snyder for Man of Steel, in case you guys want to leave Snyder out of the cool table of DC directors. But yeah, if you want more elaboration, go check out other defenses from other nicer YouTubers than me that are more nice to these dumb critics that don't deserve the kindness, like the older text videos. Check out my other great videos and cool defenses, and check out my various media like my Twitter and Discord server. Thanks for watching.